The Electoral College is extremely important for a bunch of reasons I'm going to Lex, I always do. But the big story right now is the Supreme Court is set to rule on whether state Electoral College voters have to abide by the popular vote of their state. If it becomes a cultural norm that electors just start deciding they can vote for whoever they want, then the popular vote literally becomes meaningless. Now, Democrats would tell you for the most part it is. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote and still lost. No. The nationwide popular vote doesn't choose the president, but statewide popular votes kind of do. So long as the electors vote based on what their state wanted, the system makes sense. So for those that are not familiar, let me try and break it down for you. We don't have a direct democracy, okay? We have a constitutional republic. Most of you probably get this. But you look at a state like Wyoming with 500,000 or so people. I believe they have 3 electoral votes. They have 1 House of Representative seats and 2 Senate seats. Those 2 Senate seats essentially give them a weighted bit of power in deciding who the president is. But let's be real, they still only have, I think, 3 votes. So they're not the most powerful. But the point of the Electoral College was to make sure that smaller states weren't being cut out and that the president will not be determined simply by, New York, Chicago, and now Los Angeles. At the time, there wasn't one. And California actually was a red state and actually very, very empty. It was pretty empty for a long time. If the Supreme Court rules that Electoral College voters can just vote for whoever they want and they start doing this, it all depends on whether or not they start doing it. Then we're going to see basically a big push to dissolve the Electoral College because you will end up seeing states just not representing their own votes. Case in point, the lawsuit which brought us to this point is about a guy who my understanding is he refused to vote for Hillary Clinton and instead wrote in John Kasich, got removed and sued saying I can vote for whoever I want. And now the Supreme Court is going to hear this. The Democrats want to get rid of the Electoral College. I think it is a huge mistake. I have seen how proportional voting in states works. In California, when the cities vote to take the water rights away from the rural areas, it doesn't make sense. Now, we can't prevent that entirely. Okay, we can't prevent big cities from voting for interests in their, for the most part. But the Electoral College does provide some weighted defense for smaller jurisdictions. Basically, what I saw in California was these areas that were semi-rural. Well, they were totally rural. They were farmland, and they didn't have enough people. So Los Angeles and San Diego vote for policies statewide that strip away the water rights to a certain degree, and it leaves the poor migrants in the farm areas completely without water. The situation is entirely more complicated than that. I'm oversimplifying to give you more of an analogy. The point is, we would have states secede from the union. I mean, probably not, but who would want to stay in a country where they had absolutely no representation because they just don't have enough people? So, Montana, Wyoming, they have their resources, and all of a sudden other states are voting to take away those resources and those rights from the people who live there because they don't have a proportional response. We are not a direct democracy. We are a constitutional republic, meaning we must protect the sovereignty of each state. Otherwise, we fall apart. But let's read the story and see what's going on. My big fear about this is that it's the Democrats who actually want to end the Electoral College. What we might see here, if it becomes a cultural norm that electors just vote for whoever they want and they ignore the will of the people, then we will end up with, say, Donald Trump winning re-election, and then the electors saying like, yeah, but we're going to vote for Bernie anyway because we prefer him. And then what are you going to do about it? Supreme Court already ruled. That's dangerous. Let me stress, what works about the Electoral College is that we provide weighted votes. So basically, the Electoral College should vote how the people want. That way they represent the will of the people. But we give slightly more electors to certain areas, technically. Like I said, Wyoming has 3, they have 2 senators, and they have 1 representative. That gives them 3 electoral votes. Normally, without the Electoral College, they would have the equivalent of just 1 electoral vote, essentially, because they basically just have 1 district. So we give them a little bit more power per resident to weight their authority. If the electors decide they're not going to abide by that, then you're going to have left and right furious. And 2016 was the biggest year for faithless electors. This will open the door for an argument from the left to actually get rid of the Electoral College if the voters, dissent and stop voting for how the people want. Let's read the story from the Daily Mail. They say, Supreme Court is set to rule on whether state Electoral College voters have to support the popular vote winner or are able to be, quote, faithless in landmark case, which could bring 2020 election chaos. The Supreme Court said Friday it will decide ahead of the 2020 election whether presidential electors are bound to support the popular vote winner in their states or can opt for someone else. Advocates for the court's intervention say the issue needs urgent resolution in an era of intense political polarization and the prospect of a razor-thin margin in presidential elections, although so-called faithless electors have been a footnote so far in American history. The justices will hear arguments in April and should issue a decision by late June. About 30 states require presidential electors to vote for the popular vote winner, and electors almost always do so anyway, because it's a cultural norm. But my general understanding is they can vote however they want. Check this out. This guy right here, faithless voter Michael Baca, was removed as a Colorado elector when he tried to vote for John Kasich in a write-in. Now he's at the center of a Supreme Court case which could rock the 2020 election. The Electoral College system established in the Constitution is established in the Constitution. When voters cast a ballot for the president, they are actually choosing members of the Electoral College called electors, who are pledged to that presidential candidate. The electors then choose the president. It takes 270 to win. The elector at the center of the case, Michael Baca, was part of a group known as Hamilton electors who tried to convince electors who were pledged to Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump to unite behind a consensus candidate to deny Trump the presidency. Calls for electors to go faithless were made also by anti-Trump campaigners who wanted the college to reflect the popular vote, which would have given Clinton a clear victory. Almost 5 million people signed a petition calling for the Electoral College to use the Electoral College to use their apparent right to be faithless and put Clinton in the White House. After a flurry of filings in state and federal courts, the electors met on December 19th, 2016, and Baca crossed out Clinton's name on his ballot and wrote in John Kasich, the Republican governor of Ohio, who also ran for president. Then Secretary of State Wayne Williams refused to count the vote and removed Baca as an elector. He replaced him with another elector who voted for Clinton. The federal appeals court in Denver ruled that electors can vote as they please, rejecting arguments that they must choose the popular vote winner. The state does not possess countervailing authority to remove an elector and to cancel his vote in response to the exercise of that constitutional right, the ruling said. The ruling applies only to Colorado and 5 other states in the 10th Circuit: Kansas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Utah, Wyoming. But in Washington, the state Supreme Court upheld a $1,000 fine against 3 electors there and rejected their claims. Check this out. It was 5 million people. You see this petition right here. Electoral College, make Hillary Clinton president. That was their goal, to have as many electors as possible become faithless and put in Hillary Clinton under the argument that the popular vote deems it so. There's big problems the Democrats don't understand about the Electoral College. First, many states have large populations of voters who don't vote, okay? You have blue states with tons of Republicans who don't vote because they feel like it's a waste of time. You have red states with Democrats who don't vote because they feel like it's a waste of time. The challenge ultimately I see is, or the question I would ask, are there more Republicans who don't vote in California than Democrats who don't vote in red states that are typically rural, right? Many red states have smaller populations. Most of the Democrats come from wealthy urban areas. So imagine this. California is dominated by the urban elite. There are certainly rural areas with many conservatives, but the state is typically a Democratic supermajority. How many people would consider themselves moderate or Republican and vote for a Republican, but feel like it's pointless? If we go by percentage of state, I think it's fair to argue, although not entirely foolproof, or I should say bulletproof, there's an argument to be said that there are more blue state Republicans who don't vote than red state Democrats, because red states are typically, overwhelmingly Republican, and blue states that are pretty much Democrat just don't, Republicans don't come out and vote for the president. Now, it could be wrong. But I think there's a few things Democrats need to consider before they push forward with basically dissolving the Electoral College. For one, seats in the House, which determines how many electoral votes you get, can actually be boosted by immigration and illegal immigration. If you have people who are not citizens, but they're still counted in the census, you will get redistricting to boost how many seats you have. Well, it seems for a variety of reasons, blue states are actually losing seats. Maybe this is why they want to get rid of the Electoral College, because think about it. If California is losing tons and tons of residents, and they are, Tucker Carlson just did a segment about it with a liberal host, and they talked about how native-born Californians are fleeing to like Idaho and Texas and Colorado. New York and Illinois are losing residents. the Democrats lose that electoral vote power when those states get redistricted, or when redistricting happens and those states lose seats, they're going to lose votes. But if we switch to a popular vote, then those Democratic individuals who move to rural Republican areas will still vote Democrat and they will maintain the majority. I think that's one of the big plays they're looking at. But they should absolutely consider there could be a massive proportion of sleeping Republican voters. According to Gallup, the United States is a center-right country. I wonder where all of these people are then. You've got around 35% Republican, or I should say conservative, 35 or so percent moderate, and only around 24% liberal. Is my math right? My math's probably, yeah, okay, I think my math's right. I don't have the graph pulled up, but the numbers were something like that. And so the liberals end up getting a lot of power because of these big cities dominating the states and then getting all the electoral votes. Think about this. In a state like California, you do have, I believe, around 30 or so percent of the people being conservative. But the entire state gives all of their electoral votes to the Democrat, even though some of those electors are coming from districts that are completely Republican. They're Republican rural districts. They have a representative. And because of the entire state going blue, that Republican district votes for the Democrat. How many people then, I'm sure someone could actually look up the data. How many people then would actually end up coming out and voting Republican? And could the popular vote swing in favor of the Republican? I don't know. But I will say, if it becomes, as I stated earlier, if it becomes a normal thing where people just decide because, actually, let me read this so I can lay it out for you. They say this. In all, there were 10 faithless electors in 2016, including a fourth in Washington, a Democratic elector in Hawaii, and 2 Republican electors in Texas. In addition, Democratic electors who said they would not vote for Clinton were replaced in Maine and Minnesota. In asking the Supreme Court to rule that states can require electors to vote for the state winner, Colorado urged the justices to decide the case in the next few months, not in the heat of a close presidential election. They literally are going to be doing this. This is nuts. But I guess, I don't know when you do it, the election cycle is getting bigger and bigger. Colorado officials welcomed the court's intervention. Unelected and unaccountable presidential electors should not be allowed to decide the presidential election without regard to voters' choices in state law. The 3 Washington electors, while contending they should be free to vote their conscience, also said the court should avoid the dangerous possibility of having to resolve the issue following the 2020 vote. We are glad the Supreme Court has recognized the paramount importance of clearly determining the rules of the road for presidential electors for the upcoming election and all future elections, Lawrence Lessig, the lawyer for the electors, said. So I think that's the gist of the story. So this talks about one court case, but we actually have this one from NPR. They're going to be hearing 2 cases challenging attempts to penalize electoral college delegates who failed to vote for the presidential candidate they were pledged to support. Look, man, I wouldn't consider myself a constitutional expert or anything like that. My opinions on how the Electoral College works are just that, they're mine. But I kind of think electors should absolutely vote as their states determine. I think another big factor here is how states operate when they don't play winner take all. Okay, I don't know the exact number, but I think it's 30. They're winner take all, right? Some of them actually split their delegates based on what you win, and that's more of a popular vote style system. But think about how many electoral college votes California would give to Republicans and how many Texas would give to Democrats if they if they didn't use winner take all. This is the other question I have when it comes to the ruling here. If they say that you have to vote based on the popular vote of the state, doesn't that mean that every state will become winner take all? I mean, if that's the case, I think what we'll end up seeing is a huge landslide for Donald Trump. I could be wrong, whatever, I don't know. But if they vote right now that electors can vote for whoever they want, wouldn't that effectively make every state not winner take all, meaning that it would become proportional, which would be kind of a halfway point to a popular vote? I honestly have no idea, man, but I firmly believe that the Republicans in the end will benefit the most by getting rid of the Electoral College, because I think Democrats underestimate how many Republicans don't vote in major urban cities and districts. That number would be massively bolstered. But I don't know. It's absolutely hard to predict, because I'll put it this way, too. There's probably a lot of Democrats who don't vote. They're like, my state's blue. It's always going to be blue. What's the point of voting? So they don't vote either. Perhaps if we got rid of the Electoral College system, we can't predict who would win or who would lose. But I do think it's fair to say none of that really matters. What matters is the Electoral College exists to make sure that small states are not bullied by the entire system. You got to understand, California was not always a very populous state. Los Angeles was not always this major urban center. California was once like Wyoming. California was once Republican. Democrats need to understand you can have a state that eventually switches colors or becomes much more populous or less populous. California is seeing tons of its residents leave. I think it's one of the reasons they're desperately trying to encourage migrants to come to the state, why they declare themselves a sanctuary state, because they know if they lose population, they will lose proportional power in the Senate, in the House, in the Electoral College. I think that's part of the game they're playing. And I also think, as I stated earlier, getting rid of the Electoral College makes sure that those people who leave their states will always have the same weight of their vote. You know, if a Democrat leaves California and moves to, Idaho, like they are doing, it's possible Idaho turns blue, sure. And if they play winner take all, that's really great for Democrats. But it's also more likely that those individual votes lose their weight because the state will remain red. And if that's the case, Democrats are in for a very serious problem in the future. But I will end with one more little tidbit. Maybe none of this matters. Maybe none of this matters based on the video I did yesterday on my main channel, youtube.com/Timcast, if you've not followed. I did a segment. It's titled, Democrats are in panic mode over Trump's black support. 3 polls that are considered highly credible. Marist, Rasmussen, and what's the third one? Emerson. Now, Rasmussen isn't considered to be the most credible, but they are, I think, 78% accurate according to 538. But Emerson and Marist, Emerson, I believe, is 81%, and Marist is 84%. They say Trump's support in the black community is at 30%. Now, a Washington Post Ipsos poll says 83% of black Americans think Trump is racist. We'll see who's right, but I think we've got more data suggesting Trump's support in the black community is exploding. And I think when you consider, I know I might be rehashing this, but I really want to get this in this segment to make a point. For those that already watched the yesterday's segment, with people like Kanye West, Candace Owens, Diamond and Silk, I really do think it's fair to point out that Trump really has garnered a lot of high-profile support from the black community. 30%, I don't know. But the Electoral College may not matter at all. Because the rule in politics, as it's been stated, Wall Street Journal said it, is that if the Republican can get at least 20% of the black vote, a Democrat will never win again. Unless they can win back that support. If that's true, none of this matters. It matters a little bit. If Trump's support in the black community really gets that high, Republicans are going to dominate for a long time. So let me tell you this. With the economy being as good as it is, with the woke far left fringe ideology infecting the Democrats going to war with each other, rigging the game against Bernie Sanders, everybody basically hates CNN. I'll tell you this right now. I think we are going to see, for 1,000,001 reasons, a Republican supermajority. Now, hold on. I said the same thing in 2018 before the midterms, and boy, was I wrong. So look, I'm not a psychic. I'm not here to predict things. Basically, what I do every day is I give you my thoughts and feelings on current news and try and rope these into other contextual matters that make sense. And I'm just telling you how I feel about it. It's the best I can do. Right now, and I could be wrong, I think based on the economy, based on how impeachment has played out, based on the fringe far-left ideology, which most people do not agree with, the war on the Democrats, I think Trump's base comes out. I think more members of the black community, black voters come out than people would expect. I think the Republicans sweep across the board. I think we're going to see House, Senate, Supreme Court, executive branch, super Republican. But I'll tell you this. Supermajority, okay, maybe not. Supermajority would imply, the Senate sweeps to 67 seats or something. Okay, it's not going to happen. Plus, I don't think enough Senate seats are even up in 2020. We'll see what happens. The House, maybe. If you're paying attention to what happened in the UK, I hope the left, the progressives, and the Democrats are paying attention. Now they say, but Jeremy Corbyn was so unpopular and was leading his party to ruin, just like Trump is. Nah, man, it's right-wing populist. Regular people are not playing this woke far-left game. And I'll tell you this. I'll tell you one more thing, and then I'll wrap this up. The left in the UK and in the US, not like the general left, but this woke fringe left, they've got an anti-Semitism problem. So let me wrap this together. If the electors decide to vote for whoever they want, we're running the risk of rogue electors that just break the system. If they vote for whoever they want, then truly the popular vote is meaningless. But right now, the system is mixed. It is not a group of appointed elites like lords who choose the president. They are supposed to represent the will of the people. What that means is the popular vote per state does matter, but the federal government weighs each state differently to protect minority rights. Pay attention in school, y'all. This stuff's very important. I'll leave it there. We will see what happens, but stick around. Next segment is coming up at 1 p.m., and I will see you all then.